So I'm pretty sure I have a Getting Started with 40K podcast up in my archive, but we'll push out another one here, kind of updating that, because I was speaking to a fellow Wargamer, a now neophyte in 40K, and it was really interesting from their perspective. Where do we even start? And if you've been playing Warhammer 40,000 or really any complex wargaming system for a while, there's a culture there. There's an understanding with how things work and the narrative behind it and the different aspects of that lore that even if you're a competitive player, it does influence your choices. So imagine, or maybe not, because you might be coming to this podcast searching out that information through YouTube, or you just started playing 40K. Where do we even begin? Where do we physically begin? So my first piece of advice was, what's your entry point into the hobby? There's a difference. Something has brought you to Warhammer 40,000. It might be a small group of friends to play with, basement battle reports. That's how I got started in 40K. We were playing Dungeons & Dragons. We were working on an adventure, playing all summer. Marcus was going to go back to Brazil, and his only desire for the entire summer was to take on Tiamat, the Queen of Darkness. This was AD&D, so I guess it was Takesis or something like that. And as the Dungeon Master, I'm like, we'll play all summer. I'll give you all summer to level up your fighter. And at the last day of summer, literally before you get on that flight back to Brazil, we're going to roll it with Tiamat. We'll see how you can do. So we were leading up to the final battle, and we're acquiring miniatures because we're going to paint them up, and we're going to, out of cardboard, make like a dungeon and really just do everything, do it up. We go to Dragon's Den on Central Avenue, and we're looking at miniatures, and my friend Naps goes, "Hey, Fritz, check this out. Orcs with guns." And I'm like, what do you mean orcs with guns? Orcs don't have guns, bro. That's stupid. Look at those models. It's stupid. And then we were struck. We saw Space Marines. And there was no looking back. And in that moment, you had to immediately claim your faction. Naps had already taken Space Marines. I wasn't going to do Imperial Army at the time it was called. So I'm like, I don't know, do these Eldar pirate things. And Dom, I think, took orcs. Miguel never forgave me because he took squats at the time. Sometimes it's really easy to figure out what you're going to play because you're in a group. Other times you might be, like when I walked into the Battle for Salvation Gaming Club many, many years ago, I cast open those doors and there's like 30, no exaggeration, like 30, 40K players in the room. And I'm like, wow, okay. Imagine walking into that, or maybe you're at your local store or hobby center and you walk in, you're not looking for 40K, but you see the miniatures, you see the kits, you learn a little bit about the lore, and you're like, wow, where do I go on there? So the exact entry point is really going to kind of depend on what's going on. But regardless of that, the first place I would recommend to start is to look at the narrative. And what I mean by that is, whether that's on the internet, or you're going to wiki, or you're going to kind of look through some of the source books to get an idea of the backstory behind the different factions. And I would look a little bit at the models. 40K, at its core, is a visual game. We're sitting there building, painting, collecting, setting up models. We're setting up terrain. We're pushing these pieces around. It's different than just a hex map with Avalon Hill counters with X and boxes for tanks and infantry and numeric power values on there. So you're going to win a lot of games. You're going to lose a lot of games. You're going to have a lot of fun. But it is physical, connecting with the models. If you like how Tyranids look and you like the backstory, then play Tyranids. You're going to win a lot of games. You're going to lose a lot of games. And you're going to become connected to your army. That's kind of the first piece of advice that I would give on there. Really try to fall in love with one faction, or try to fall in love with an aspect of the game. Now, maybe you've narrowed it down. You're like, I want to play Space Marines, but I don't know what kind of Space Marines. Narrow it down as best you can. The next piece, and this is what's great about YouTube, battle reports, and showcasing the different models. Let's just say Tyranids. You've narrowed it down and you're like, look, I'm going to play space bugs. And then you realize in this weird world, I can go outside and get bugs for free, but I'm going to pay lots and lots of money for plastic bugs on there. Like, something is not connecting. Figure out the units that you want to purchase. Figure out where you want to start. So here's how we do this. If you are part of a gaming club or a gaming group where there's a Tyranid players, or you have access to that knowledge, of course, try to talk to them. See, if I was playing Tyranids and I play Tyranids. If someone new came to the club and was like, hey, I'm interested in playing Tyranids, even if I'm on a Chaos kick, which I am right now, and a Necron kick, then I would say, hey, I'll bring my Tyranid army next week. Try them out. It might not have all the units you want. It might not be the playstyle you want, but you could take it for a test drive on there. If you have a small Tyranid army and you've gotten started because maybe you inherited it or maybe you purchased it used, try to link up with a fellow Tyranid player, because they're going to be able to let you try out some units. They're going to be able to give you some feedback. They're going to be able to say, okay, I see what you're trying to do here. It's not going to work with those units. It will make narrowing down the model acquisition part, because that's the amazing thing about 40K, yet at the same time the challenging thing about 40K. Within each army there's so much to acquire. There are so many different synergies to look at and to bring in. And that's before we even bring in from other stuff outside of your army. It can be it is very overwhelming. Even for me sometimes, playing as long as I have, it's like, man, there's a lot of stuff out here. And we're going to get to collecting it all, and you're going to grow your army, and it's going to be massive, but we can only go one step at a time. So if you can get a little bit of that feedback of model acquisition based on your play style or your imagined play style, how you want to play, that's going to make things much, much, much easier on there. If you don't have access to a big gaming club, or if you're with your friends like I got started, where you're all going in at the same time, so we're all building up our armies at the same time, then that is where you go to YouTube. That's where you watch some battle reports. That's where you type in the unit tactics or how to play. And YouTube being what it is, the 40K community is very open, is very straightforward with their opinions and what they share. So maybe it leads you to someone's blog, or it leads you to a place where you can communicate with them and say, look, I'm thinking about these units, or I saw you using this unit, or just I have a choice of these 3 options. What do you think? To solicit that feedback and get that feedback, that is going to help you narrow it down and get started much, much quicker. The sidebar to that is, and Games Workshop is doing an amazing job at this. The duality of it's never been more overwhelming to play 40K, but at the same time, the rate of release and the amazing choices that are out there is just crazy. It's just absolutely crazy. So certainly there are kind of the starter sets, but there's also the themed boxes, right, where you're taking 2 factions, you're rolling it up into a little story, and they're fighting each other. Those boxes are actually, while they're not balanced, and the play style is a little bit all over the place, it's not something that you would bring to competitively play, but it is an interesting starting point. If you can pick up one of those sets that has 2 factions that you like both of them, that's a great entry point into both of those areas on there. So be open to possibly buying one-on-one, whether that's new on Sprue or used on eBay, but also realize that some of the different combination sets and starter sets out there, there's some interesting stuff in there also to play with. That would be my starting point. And really kind of narrowing down and minimizing that advice. I'm going to turn this over to those of you on my channel whose feedback I appreciate tremendously, for the new neophytes, right? For the new Hive Commander, for those who have just tasted the power of the Dark Gods and are now ready to turn their back on the Emperor. What do you recommend? What aspects, or actually, you know what, more important, How did you get started in 40K?